Playwright Anton Chekhov famously said, "Never place a loaded rifle on stage if it isn't going to go off." In other words, every detail must be relevant, and every setup should have a payoff. Thus, the narrative principle of Chekhov's gun was born. But it isn't always a gun. Chekhov's Whatever is a podcast where myself and guests watch a movie and try to predict what role Chekhov's gun will play. Welcome to Chekhov's Whatever. Hello and welcome to Chekhov's Whatever, the podcast that makes a game of movies and storytelling. I'm your host, Meg Mazeski. Here with me today to discuss the 2025 mystery thriller Drop is Kyle Gerkin. Welcome to the podcast, Kyle.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Kyle himself is a filmmaker. He is the writer and director of the 2015 drama 7 Hours in Heaven, which is about a weekend getaway where 6 friends play a game that tests their relationships and changes their lives forever, which is available to rent or buy on Amazon Video. Once again, that's called 7 Hours in Heaven. Kyle, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I started filmmaking, really, I guess, as a kid, as a lot of people do, just making silly little home movies with a camcorder and messing around with my friends. I remember back then I did not have any editing capabilities, so we'd have to shoot everything totally sequentially and just keep doing takes until we got it right and then move on to the next scene and do it all chronologically. That was a hard way to make films. But anyway, obviously I've loved movies ever since I was a kid. I remember, having sort of magical experiences when the lights would go down in the theater and scream would come up, and watching like E.T. and, those are some of my earliest memories of movies like that. And I just never stopped, never fell out of love with movies. And so, like I said, I did some those kind of filmmaking as a kid. And then as I got into college, I was studying screenwriting and filmmaking, and was planning to kind of go out to LA and try to make a go of it, but life had other plans for me. But
you made a movie. You've got IMDb credits.
So I kind of got into a position where, was stable enough to take time to step away from the sort of 9-to-5 grind and do just some consulting work stuff, to have the freedom to try to make a go of the filmmaking thing again. And so I started really taking some acting classes. I started taking acting classes at this Meisner studio here in Arizona. And then that's where I started meeting people, who were in the local film scene here. And I started acting in some of the films. And, as I was doing those acting performances, I would see, I kept my eyes open. I saw kind of what was happening, how these were being made. And I thought, okay, I can do this, right? So then I started working on my own short projects. I have quite a few short films which are available on YouTube, and then finally felt like I was ready to step up to a feature, and that was where 7 Hours in Heaven came in. So thank you for that plug at the top. I appreciate it.
Of course. I really admire that, pursuing your passions like that. I noticed that you also wrote and directed a short film called The MacGuffin.
Yeah.
So you are certainly no stranger to movie tropes.
That is true. Yes. Movie tropes or bad puns.
Love it. That's what we're here for. Movie tropes and bad puns. I'm very excited to get your perspective on this movie.
Yeah, I'm excited to share it and to get yours.
The movie in question for today's episode is Drop. This is a 2025 mystery thriller. A widowed mother's first date in years takes a terrifying turn when she's bombarded with anonymous threatening messages on her phone. She must do exactly as directed, or her young son and sister will die. Her unseen tormentor's final directive? Kill her date. This movie stars Megan Fahey, Brandon Sklenar, and Reed Diamond. It was directed by Christopher Landon. Currently on Rotten Tomatoes, it has an 84% critic score and an 80% audience score. Pretty respectable. Kyle, did you have any expectations for this film?
I had zero expectations for this film, actually.
I feel like that's a good way to go into a movie, actually.
I feel like, well, it's a good way to go into movies in general. I agree. I like the process of discovery. But I think particularly for this game, I think it's very important. I think if I had seen even the trailer, which I haven't watched even after the fact, but I assume that they give away certainly where certain elements are going. I mean, I don't know how you wouldn't.
They certainly do.
So I think to have the purity of the game and really test your ability to spot these Chekhov's whatevers, I think it's best to go in completely blind, which is basically what I did. The only thing that I had any knowledge at all going in was when you first sent me a few selections to choose from.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at this Rotten Tomatoes score and I read like the first couple of words of the synopsis, and I think I just saw the word Hitchcockian, and I was like, all right,
Yes.
let's go. That's good enough for me. 86 on Rotten Tomatoes, Hitchcockian. That's all I need to know. Let's do it.
Sold, totally. I had watched the trailer, and I agree with your assessment that it probably would have been better not to, because a lot of the twists do get spoiled. I think I would have enjoyed it even more if I did not know where this movie was headed. So, listener, I was going to say, if you're listening to this podcast and haven't seen the movie yet, what are you doing? We're going to spoil the crap out of it. So stop now. Don't watch the trailer. Go watch the movie. Come back. Before we get into Drop, here is a quick overview of how Chekhov's Whatever works. This is a podcast where myself and the guest watch and review a movie that's new to us. We also play a game where we try to guess what Chekhov's gun will be and how it will play out later in the movie. Chekhov's gun is a plot element that must have a setup and a payoff. That setup typically happens in Act 1, and the payoff typically comes later in Act 3. A Chekhov's gun is also typically a concrete item, action, or person, rather than something symbolic or thematic. And finally, a Chekhov's gun should move the plot forward in a meaningful way. We get +2 points if we correctly identify a Chekhov's gun. We also get an additional point if we correctly guess how that Chekhov's gun will pay off. And finally, we lose 1 point if we incorrectly identify a Chekhov's gun and its role. Whoever has the most points at the end of the movie wins. We start our movie with opening credits over slow-mo footage of objects dropping and breaking. Lots of timepieces, a wristwatch, a clock, an hourglass, dinnerware, plates, wine glasses, etc., and also game pieces like chess pieces and dominoes. So even the opening credits are a little preview of what's to come, what plot elements are to come. We open up on our protagonist, Violet, as played by Megan Fahey. This is a flashback, and she is being beaten by her husband, Blake, and she's trying desperately to escape him.
So this is, I guess, a couple things. One, another thing, besides not having any expectations of the movie, because I was basically blind as far as knowing anything about the plot or anything, I also really don't have familiarity with these actors either,
Yes.
which I thought, again, is nice, because, anytime you go into a movie with actors that right? You've got all this baggage of, what types of characters they normally play, and are they playing against type, whatever. So this was much more of a blank slate. I mean, I recognize these actors have done some things. I think it seems like Fahey's probably most known for White Lotus season 2, which I did not watch. And then, Brandon Sklenar, who's one of the other leads. I saw he's been in some movies I've seen, like Vice and Midway and Emily the Criminal, but I don't remember him in any of those. So
Sure.
But in any case, I don't know how big his roles were in there. It looks like he also is one of the leads of 1923, which I know was a very successful show, but another one that I have not watched. So anyway, I thought it was kind of nice to also not have that piece, given that I was, going to be somewhat guessing here. And then the other thing I was going to mention about this opening scene is that I was like immediately I don't know if angry is maybe a little too strong, but annoyed at the opening, because I thought it was a flash forward, which I am so sick of flash forwards in movies and TV shows. I feel like every single movie and TV show in the universe now always has to start with a flash forward, and then they're like, okay, and then 3 months earlier, and it's like,
how did we get
here?
And
I mean, that's becoming such an annoying trope. It's like, and the thing about it to me is like, oh, it can work, right? It's not saying it can never work, but you really need to earn it. There needs to be a reason why you showed us to this. Like, is the movie really better because we knew this, or would it have been better because you're automatically taking away some of the suspense, right? You're taking away,
absolutely,
like, you're saying, okay, well, I know this is coming now, so I'm not going to be surprised. Yeah, maybe how it plays out or something is different than you expected, or how they got there is different, but the basic idea, I know why they do it. I know it's like, hey, grab their attention, right? Get them early, but it's just annoying to me, because I'm like, this just would have been better had you just told it chronologically and led up to to this thing. And I think that's the case like 95% of the time. So I was like, oh, great. And I flash forward. And I didn't know, I thought it was going to be that. But then I was happy to see, as you just mentioned, it was a flashback, but we don't know that at this point. So
that's true. It does not say like 2 years ago or what have you. No, I agree with all those points. I'm in general a fan of in media res, but I do agree that it's a little tiresome to have the flash forward. I won't spoil the movie I saw recently, but I watched another thriller that started with the flash forward, and it really did kill the tension for most of the movie because I knew certain people were still alive.
Right.
So there were certain scenes where I'm like, well, obviously this person doesn't die here, even though they're in peril. Yes, there has to be a pretty good reason for the flash forward. Yeah. And also going back to your initial comment, I too was not terribly familiar with these main actors' previous work. I had seen season 2 of The White Lotus, but I can't say that Megan Fahey particularly stood out in my mind. And that was something that intrigued me about the trailer is I do think it's always fun to watch unknown talent, or at least talent that's unknown to me, and seeing what they can produce without relying on star power. In this flashback, Violet's husband pulls a gun on her and raves about how she's making him do this. Then he forces the gun into her hand and urges her to pull the trigger. She shakily takes aim, and then we cut to flash forward. Violet is now a trauma therapist. She helps women who are survivors of domestic abuse just like her. After wrapping up a successful Zoom session with her client, Violet is startled by a meter reader at her window.
Okay, so this is my first Chekhov's whatever. The meter reader, right, was my first. I called it Chekhov's meter reader.
Me too.
Okay, well, there you go. We're aligned.
And how do you think Chekhov's meter reader will come back later in the movie?
So I thought that because she says, "Oh, you can go through the back gate," that the back gate would later be used to access the house.
Mm-hmm. So I had seen the trailer, so I know the broad strokes of this movie. And my guess was that she would later see this man, recognize him, and realize that he is involved in the plot against her. So I think she will have a recollection moment, put the pieces together, and in recognizing this meter reader man, she will be able to do something to get out of the situation.
And I did feel like this was a fairly obvious one, just because
Yes.
It was so unnecessary, right? For that, like there was no other reason to have this. If it's and I mean obviously that's sort of the whole thing, right? With these, especially if you do pay attention to screenwriting or you pay attention to the way these films are constructed, right? There's especially in a 90-minute film or something, you really don't have time to waste on like random conversations or random character introductions and stuff if they don't mean anything, right? It's usually just a really bad film if they do a lot of that.
Yes.
So yeah, and this was one where it was just like, what was the point of that? There was no, like, yeah, sure, it's quick. It takes like 20 seconds or something, but why are you going to spend 20 seconds on the meter reader if it's not going to have any other relevance? So.
Exactly. Everything should be relevant. If you find yourself watching a movie and asking what's the point of that, the answer should be, well, it'll be important later. And like you said, if the answer is it wasn't important, then then maybe the screenplay should have been, tightened up a little bit.
And the only thing I would say that where it could have been, I still don't think it would have been good. I think there probably would have other ways to do it. But if you were saying like, well, it was just trying to set the tone, like she gets a little bit frightened, right? When then there's a knock at the window and she kind of jumps. So just kind of that, a little bit of things are threatening, things could jump out at you or whatever. If they're just trying to set that tone with that, I guess that'd be the only reason why it couldn't come back if that was the point of it. But that didn't feel like a strong enough thing to me. So that's why I guessed it as my first Chekhov's whatever.
It is establishing her character a little bit in that, like you said, she is a bit jumpy. We see from this that she's not over this traumatic event that happened to her in the beginning of the film, and she does have this sort of like cautious nature, so it is laying the groundwork a little bit for things that happen with her character later in the film.
So one thing I was curious about is this movie was in the theater. As far as I could tell, it wasn't available streaming, right? So you went and saw it in the theater?
I did, yes.
which I did as well, obviously. And I was kind of wondering about that. I was wondering if, like, in general, at least easier, if not better, to watch these films for the purpose of this game at home when you can actually pause it and then make clear notes. Because I was like, I guess I'll be taking notes in the dark. Like,
yes. That's exactly what I did. I do prefer to watch these at home. Also, I do prefer to watch them twice so that I can better summarize these scenes. So yes, please do stick with me, audience, if I forget any points, because I was, frantically scribbling notes in the movie.
Oh yeah, you really had a tough job because you have to summarize the whole film. I'm just along for the ride here. All I had to do is write down my Chekhov's whatevers. But even that, as I was writing in the dark, I mean, first off, my handwriting is barely legible under the best of circumstances, like
Me too.
so I mean, in broad daylight stuff, you can barely read my chicken scratch. So I was the movie itself was suspenseful, but the biggest suspense for me was, would I be able to tell anything when I got home and looked at my notes? I was like, why did I write these in Russian? Like, what is going on? But fortunately, when I went home, because I went home immediately and then I transcribed them. And had I not done that while it was still fresh, I'm not sure I could have deciphered anything. But fortunately, it worked out okay. But that was quite a suspenseful moment.
Yeah, I think I might have to learn shorthand just for the purposes of this podcast. And there was one moment in my notes where I had written directly over a previous sentence. So I was like, oh no. But I think I deciphered it okay. We'll see. So later that evening, after Violet is done with work, she is getting ready for a date. She's anxious, but she puts on a brave face as she plays with her young son, Toby. While they are playing together, Toby uses his toy Jeep to send a cute little handwritten note to his mother. This is my second Chekhov's toy Jeep.
I did not identify this one.
Not to spoil too far in the movie, but I was pretty proud of this one. Since Toby sent a note on top of the Jeep, and again, since I saw the trailer, I know that there's going to be a home invader. I know that Toby is going to be in peril because of this masked man. So my guess was that Toby would use the remote control car to distract the bad guy at some point, allowing him to escape from the bad guy.
Not only did I not identify this, I had no recollection of the Jeep even, being involved.
It's one of those things. There was like a quick zoom in and I'm like, why are we lingering on this toy car? A good sign of a Chekhov's gun. I'm gonna blame it on, maybe I was writing down the meter reader or something at that time. Fair.
But no, I missed it.
Violet's sister Jen arrives to babysit Toby, but not before giving Violet a little makeover and also a little pep talk. She encourages her by saying, not all men are like her ex-husband.
One thing that I don't know if this is just sort of more of a sign of my lack of style or understanding of women's fashion or whatever, but I thought her clothes looked just fine. Like when she started out, I thought it looked good. I mean, look, I'm all for a plunging neckline as much as the next guy, but
Sure.
but I was like, what's wrong with that outfit? But her sister was quite critical.
Very critical. No, I agree. It was very nice clothes. It was just maybe not as slinky as you would want for a first date. Not red enough. They give her a nice little red dress to look like a bombshell in.
So just before we leave the house to go to the restaurant, she says something like to the effect of, "Oh, remember, I'll be watching."
Yes.
And kind of indicates that there's a nanny cam. So I labeled that Chekhov's nanny cam. And my guess was that it would pay off by being used to spy on an intruder in the house.
I think that is an excellent guess, and I probably would have guessed that myself if not for having seen the trailer. But since I saw the trailer, that would have been cheating if I had guessed that. Yeah. So I did not, but yes, noted. Violet, newly made over in her slinky red dress, she arrives for her date at an incredibly chic, upscale restaurant called Palette, which has panoramic views at the top of a skyscraper in downtown Chicago. I have to say I loved the name of this restaurant, Palette, because it was so believable to me as the name of an expensive restaurant trying to sound fancy. At the restaurant, Violet waits for her date Henry to arrive. As she waits, she meets our cast of suspects. We have an overly PDA couple in the elevator, a friendly female bartender, a diner who very conspicuously bumps into Violet, the restaurant's drunken and flirty lounge lizard pianist, and finally Richard, as played by Reed Diamond, a slightly older man who enthusiastically inquires whether Violet is his blind date he's meant to meet. Violet lets him down gently, but he's good-natured and friendly about it, and he seems like a nice guy.
And this is another one where I don't know if this counts as a Chekhov's whatever or not. I feel like this is maybe slightly cheating, but you just mentioned Reed Diamond as character.
Yes.
And so I just labeled this Chekhov's Reed Diamond because I feel like, so Reed Diamond is an actor who I feel like is relatively obscure. Like, I don't think he's really well known.
Not everyone is a Homicide Life on the Street fan like me.
Okay, so that's what you know him from. See, I know him very well because he's a very pivotal character in The Shield. Have you ever watched The Shield, the television?
I haven't seen that one. No.
So The Shield was and is one of my favorite shows of all time, I would say. But anyway, I don't know. I guess spoilers for a 24-year-old show at this point. But he is very prominent in the very first episode. He's even in all the advertising for the first episode. They put him very front and center, and his name is all over it. And it basically looks like it's going to be like a Reed Diamond vehicle. But then he's killed at the end of the first episode. And that his death ends up being like a lot of the plot engine for literally the whole series. So he ends up being this really pivotal and important character in that show. And that's the only reason I know him. But because of that, I do know him and I know his name. And so otherwise, when the film starts and during the credits, I think he's like the third name in the credits. And I immediately was like, oh, Reed Diamond, like I know him. And then he gets introduced in the movie, and just because I'd seen him so high in the credits, I knew he had to be like a major character in the movie, even though they sort of, make it like he's not going to be, like the way they set it up. But anyway, so that was one where I was like, well, I kind of know just from his placement in the credits that they wouldn't have put him that high if he's going to really truly be this like, gee, he's not going to come back. That was, again, so I don't know if I want to really count that, but it is something that I noticed.
Well, I think we can definitely talk about whether that is in fact a Chekhov's gun when we tally the points at the end. But to that point, this is a way sometimes for sure of identifying Chekhov's gun just by looking at the caliber of the cast, because sometimes an actor or actress is so well known, and if they only appear for a moment, you're like, well, why would Morgan Freeman appear for 1 minute to never come back again? So it is sort of a way of metagaming Chekhov's gun. You're like, well, we have the setup here of this actor being introduced, so surely there will be a payoff because the talent wouldn't be wasted like that. And we were talking about how the cast is relative unknowns. And I would also classify Reed Diamond as a relative unknown. He just happens to be someone who you and I are both probably more familiar with than maybe the average viewer. But I too was like, Reed Diamond, he's the only name I recognize in this cast, so therefore he must have more than just a bit part. And like you said, his billing was pretty high up there as well. So it is a sort of way of metagaming the plot, if not the Chekhov's gun.
Yeah.
And yes, I do love Reed Diamond. 2 shout outs to Homicide Life on the Street, 2 episodes in a row. I'll see if I can keep it going for more episodes.
Nice. Yeah, you got to get a streak going now.
But yeah, so we meet most of our cast of characters. We'll meet a few other people soon, like the waiter. But since this is a mystery and a thriller and Hitchcockian, like you said, this is our cast of suspects, right? And as you were saying with introducing the meter reader earlier, there has to be a reason for introducing these characters. So not everyone will be important. Some will be red herrings, surely, but that's the classic setup for this type of locked room, sort of Agatha Christie-esque movie. Who did it? Who's the bad guy? Who done it? There's also a movie trope that's often referred to as the law of economy of characters. And it's basically Chekhov's gun, but for people. It says that a screenplay should only include characters who are essential to the story's progression. So I feel like we see that a lot here. We know of these people we've just met, one of them is the bad guy, no question. We just have to discover who could it be.
Although, of course, at this point, like at least for me, having not seen the trailer, I don't even know that there is a bad guy. I mean, yes, I suspect that something of consequence is going to happen. Otherwise, it'd be a very boring movie. But
Yes.
I'm not yet even aware of there being a bad guy per se. So, but that's coming very soon.
Indeed. Speaking of the bat guy, at that moment, Violet receives some odd and vaguely threatening text messages and memes, or drops, if you will, from someone nearby. Question, this is something that always entertains me. The attempt to do memes in popular culture. I feel like it's very hard to create a fictitious meme because there's just something so indescribable about what makes a meme, you know? And in trying to create a meme that's not actually like a natural evolution from the culture or from the internet community, it can come off as like very forced. I don't know. Did you feel like these were successful memes in your opinion?
It's a good question. I would say I didn't really think about it in the film. I'm not necessarily a connoisseur of memes myself, so obviously
Sure.
look, I mean, I'm alive in 2025, so I'm aware of memes, but I wouldn't say I'm a huge consumer of them, so therefore I wasn't even aware. Like, do you know for a fact these were like completely made up memes, or these were not like alterations of existing memes? Or
Sure, the meme templates are real meme templates.
Right.
Like they took real life existing meme templates and then, you know, created their own captions for them. So yeah, to answer that and to answer my own question, as far as fictitious memeing goes, I feel like this movie did an okay job. I was like, I don't feel like this is a brand attempting to make a meme and it just comes off really cringy, like when McDonald's is like, hey youths, we're going to use this thing that was popular on TikTok 3 months ago. You know, I feel like the movie did an okay job of making believable memes.
yeah, I mean, it didn't take me out of the movie, put it that way. So yeah, it didn't. If it didn't occur to me, then that's probably a good thing.
That's true. If it wasn't noticed or wasn't noticeable as being cringe, then it was probably at least mildly successful.
Probably think I was more focused on the creepy or threatening nature of them than so much the meme content itself.
Whether they were tryhards or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Finally, Violet's date arrives, Henry, as played by Brandon Sklenar. He's kind of Hemsworth-esque, Hemsworth adjacent, you know.
Is he Australian?
I don't think so.
He actually reminded me, speaking of Australians, he reminded me of a young Russell Crowe.
Oh, yeah, I can see it.
So he had a bit of that vibe. The beard and just like a little bit of a thicker build and, beefier build and stuff. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, handsome guy.
Yeah, he's handsome. He's self-deprecating. They immediately have chemistry. They share some cute, playful banter, some slightly awkward first date jitters. As far as meet cutes go, I thought it was pretty good. I'm like, obviously they're both hot people.
Right.
So, I believe that they would be attracted to each other. I liked the dialogue. I thought it was believable as a first date meeting without feeling too forced.
Plus we know at this point that this isn't while this is their first time meeting face to face, they've been communicating on an app for several months. So the sister establishes that early, right? So it's not like they have no like they're feeling their way out through like a first encounter necessarily.
Yeah, so they do have a little bit of rapport already, but they've finally met each other. And to demonstrate that he's a real mensch, Henry has even brought a gift for Violet's son. It's a Chicago Blackhawks hockey puck. I have Chekhov's hockey puck.
I have Chekhov's hockey puck as well. And I actually have just prior to that, I have another Chekhov's whatever.
Oh, please.
So
yes.
when the hockey puck gets given, that's when they're sitting at the table by the window. And when they first sit down at that table, she has a reaction to the heights, because it's at the top of the skyrise, right? So
yes.
I had Chekhov's reaction to heights, because the way she kind of sort of lurches back and is like, oh my gosh, like this is so high.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very visible reaction. And so my guessed payoff there was that she would have to overcome her fear of heights at a climactic moment.
Excellent. And what role do you think Chekhov's hockey puck will play?
I guessed that it would be used as a weapon.
Me too. We're on the same wavelength as far as these Chekhov's whatevers go. Henry is a press photographer, the mayor's official photographer, in fact, and he apologizes for bringing his camera bag with him, explaining that he can't risk having it stolen. Quick fire, I have another Chekhov's gun, Chekhov's camera bag. Again, this is one of those things where it's like, why are they making a point to point out this bag? Surely it must be relevant in some way. So at this point in the movie, and based off of the trailer, I feel like the trailer does make it interestingly ambiguous as to whether Henry is a good guy or a bad guy. So based on my reaction of the trailer, I was like, at this point, I think that we can't rule out Henry as being a bad guy either. And there might be some sort of double cross going on. Anyway, he's a suspect in my book at this point as well. So my guess for how the camera bag would come back is that I think there's a weapon inside the camera bag. Violet will discover this weapon, and this will be a revelation for her in some way, either that Henry is a bad guy or that he is more than he seems.
Yeah, I did not identify the camera bag, although I probably should have noticed that.
We shall see what happens. Yes, the meet cute continues, and they are greeted by their flamboyant waiter, Matt. He is an improv actor. He makes some corny jokes about a hat that's afraid of heights, and he says, "Oh, you're on your first date? I'm on my first shift." So I just thought this was a very funny character. I want to give kudos to this guy because I felt that the Matt waiter brought some nice levity to the film overall.
Was the theater that you watched in, was it how full was it? Like,
not very full. It was a pretty sparse crowd, but he did draw a lot of laughs for sure.
The reason I ask is I was in a fairly full theater and it was crickets. Like he did not get any laughs.
Oh no, poor Matt.
Yeah, so that's it's always fascinating to see like how different the reactions are.
How did you feel? Did he fall flat for you
I
too?
felt like I liked the idea of it. I liked adding some levity to the film, like having some comic relief. I think that was important. But yeah, I felt like and I don't think it was the actor's fault, but I feel like the joke writing could have been stronger. Like I didn't feel like it just felt like I liked the idea of it. I liked the idea of that character and the overzealous improv guy. I think there was
Yes.
definitely meat on the bone there, but for whatever reason, I don't feel like they landed it. So I don't know. Anyway, like I said, and at least my audience seemed to agree in that regard because I was just literally, I don't think I heard a single chuckle out of a fairly full theater. So I was, but audiences can be totally different. And that's something I learned when, like, not to reference my film again, but when it actually showed at the Phoenix Film Festival back in 2015, and there were 2 sold out screenings, so like 350 people or something. And the audience reactions were totally different to different moments, in those, again, some moments where people laughed in one, they didn't laugh in the other. Some moments where you could feel the tension in one, you couldn't feel it in the other. So it was just like, you just never know. So to your point, obviously your audience was entertained.
Yeah, very different reaction. But to your point about Matt perhaps being too cartoonish and maybe not so great in execution, I would agree with that point, and also applying that thought more broadly to the entire cast of supporting characters. So all the folks I mentioned previously, the people who are populating the restaurant, I feel like everyone is kind of a caricature in one way or another. There's something sort of just very broad about, I would say, everyone in the supporting cast. So I do feel like that could have been refined a little bit better. Like I felt like Violet and Henry were living in this cartoonish world where everyone else was either too weird or too friendly or too sleazy or too stuck up. I felt like they weren't living in a truly populated world in this movie.
Yeah, I take your point. I think to some degree that's, I think, kind of you had mentioned like Agatha Christie earlier, right? You referenced that, and that's always sort of the the nature of those stories, right? The characters are very broadly drawn. So maybe that was kind of the idea to do something along those lines. Especially if you have limited screen time, they kind of need to establish, oh, this is this type of person, right? This type of so
Yes.
I understand, but if you're looking for purely for a kind of cinematic realism, there was I guess it's a little lacking in that regard.
To that point, for a 90-minute thriller, you kind of have to make do with archetypes, and I understand that. You can't have everyone be a fully fleshed out character. The date seems to be going well, but Violet is distracted by the ominous airdropped memes she keeps receiving from a user called Let's Play. She shows these messages to Henry. Henry says that since the messages are being airdropped, digidrop, I'm sure that Apple wants nothing to do with this movie. Since they are being airdropped, Let's Play must be someone nearby, someone inside the restaurant. He tries to reassure Violet, saying it must be a prank of some kind, and he makes a sort of game out of trying to discover who the mysterious messenger might be. Henry makes a circuit of the restaurant, and then they sort of playfully discuss the possible suspects.
Yeah, you mentioned the airdrop, digidrop rather than airdrop.
Yes.
But it's funny because they do reference airdrop. He, like the Henry character says something along the lines of, well, I'm more of an airdrop guy myself, but just to establish it's a nice shorthand, right, for the audience to be like, oh, okay, so that's what this is, basically airdrop technology. But yeah, I wonder what the idea was, if it was just Apple, if they actually were like, oh, we don't want people to think you can use our app to torture people or create like stalking situations.
Right. Well, Apple is kind of infamously a stickler about this. For example, you are not allowed to depict a character on screen using an iPhone unless they're a good guy. Like, Apple will get pissed at you if you give a bad guy an iPhone, and they will come after you. So this is another way of metagaming movies. If someone is using an iPhone, they're probably a good guy.
That's interesting. I did not know that. I mean, is that legally defensible that you can, like?
I don't know if it's legally defensible, but I think people are rightfully afraid of being sued by Apple, whether there is basis for that or not.
That seems crazy to me. Like, I feel like this is something I looked into, when I was or as a filmmaker. And I feel like, and I get people are just like, okay, well, Apple has, $1 trillion and all these lawyers, so maybe I don't want to mess with it, even if I do have a strong case. But I thought the basic rule was, if you're just like using something, right, that is a thing in the world that people would use, like, generally, you can't say, oh, well, no, you can't use that because it's this. It's one thing if they would say, oh, like, I work for Apple and blah, blah, blah. That's different. Or, whatever. But if it's just like someone owning an iPhone, it's like, when that's the most popular phone in the world, that seems right. Like, but anyway, but I understand.
Well, yeah, listener, don't take my word for it. I don't know what I'm talking about often, but yes, take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I always thought one of the reasons why people would not use or wouldn't show logos is because they would hope to get like promotional consideration, right? Like for product placement, basically. Whereas if you just use it, you're effectively giving them free advertising. But I didn't know it was an actual. I guess neither of us know. I guess we're so yeah. It'll be interesting to look into.
Listeners, chime off in the comments. Let us know how wrong we are. Another interesting thing I thought about airdropping and even about the entire conceit of the film is that I do always find it interesting when a film tries to lean into technology of the day, which obviously this movie does. The title of the movie itself is Drop, which is a play on words. We'll get to that later. But it is also straightforwardly about airdropping messages. And my question was, does everyone in the audience understand what an airdrop is? Because they really don't go out of their way to explain it too much in depth in the movie. The movie just kind of works from the assumption that the audience will know what is going on and roll with it. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's a good question. It didn't occur to me until you just now said it, but I do feel like they do enough to show you in the movie. They give you enough context that you basically understand that, okay, these are messages that can be sent, they have to be sent from somebody who's within 50 feet. Like they specifically say that. And I think that's really all you need. I mean, again, that's not to say that maybe somebody's not confused if they're particularly non-tech savvy or whatever, but I do feel like the basic is, as long as you understand, like, okay, this is some kind of a message that your phone can receive, but someone has to be within 50 feet, which is I think they establish all those things. And I think that's probably enough.
That's true. They do establish that. And in the scene that we were just talking about where Henry does a circuit of the room and he's like, it has to be someone here. So I guess you're right. They do establish the important point, which is that the person who's sending it must be someone in close proximity, and therefore the bad guy is someone within that restaurant. So I guess they do enough to establish everything you need to know. Violet continues to get these airdropped messages, and she checks in on her nanny cam and is shocked to see a masked man in her home brandishing a gun. Just as she's about to raise the alarm, Let's Play instructs Violet not to say anything at all. No 911, no cops, no leaving the restaurant, no allowing Henry to leave. Also, her phone's been cloned, so he'll know if she tries to contact anyone. And if she doesn't do exactly as she's told, her son and her sister will die. Something that I liked about this scene is that she immediately at least tries to seek out help, which I feel like is the right thing to do. And probably most everyone's natural first response would be like, I have to try to get help somehow. In other similar movies with similar plots, I find it very frustrating when the character just immediately plays along and is like, oh, okay, I won't even try to call for help right away. So I don't know. I liked that about the character.
Yeah, I agree. She, I think for the most part, she acts in a way that feels believable, right? It's not just like she's just doing the things that she needs to do to advance the plot or whatever. Like you said, it's for her first instinct, of course, is call 911, which I think would be the first instinct of 99% of us if we saw there was an intruder in our home. But yeah, I think that you mentioned the like the cloning of the phone, that which is obviously does a lot of the work in the movie, and I thought it's kind of a very tossed off thing, like, oh, by the way, we cloned your phone. And I understand you need some way to be like, okay, we're monitoring your phone, but it's like, how easy is that to do, and when did they get an opportunity to do that? And it's glided past very quickly, just like, oh,
it certainly is.
We did this thing, so yeah, so that you can not get away with doing anything on your phone. So
I would say this is the first of many moments where the bad guy does something very omnipresent and all powerful that is very quickly hand waved by the movie. Like, don't worry about it, audience. Don't think about it too hard. And then they quickly move past it in an attempt to hope that you will not dwell on it too much.
Which I will say, for the most part, like, I think worked in the moment.
I would say so too.
I mean, partially for me, and this was actually a very interesting process in general, the way I was watching this movie, to play this game, right? Because when I watch movies, I really try to turn the analytical part of my brain off, because I want to go on the journey, right? I want to go on the journey the filmmaker wants to take me on. And so I really try never to like guess ahead or like, oh, what might this lead to or whatever. I just like to be, swept along by the film. But of course, the premise of this whole game is that you have to do the opposite of that.
Yes.
And you really have to be thinking all the time, like, what might be the significance of this and how might it pay off, make your guesses ahead, so on and so forth. So it was a very different way of approaching a movie than I normally do, but also that kind of analytical stuff, right? That's the stuff that after I finish the movie and I start thinking back at it, I'm like, wait a minute, like, that didn't really make sense.
Wait a second.
So it'll be interesting if, I don't know, I assume maybe we'll do some nitpicking at the end of the.
I certainly have some nits to pick at the climax of this movie. Violet is distraught, understandably, and she excuses herself to the restroom. She asks some girls in the restroom to borrow their eyeliner and tries to scrawl out a help message on her hand with the eyeliner. But it's not very successful, and they just think she's maybe a little crazy or drunk, and the girls leave. When they leave, Let's Play warns Violet not to try anything funny, and she finds a bug in the restroom and also notices the security cameras. So it's pretty clear at this point that her tormentor has eyes and ears on her, no matter where she goes. When Violet returns to the table, she spots a bug on the table lamp too, and requests that they move tables. claiming the skyline view is giving her the vapors. The hostess is a little bit peeved. She reminds Henry that he specifically requested that table when he checked on their reservation, a conversation that he does not recall having. So if it wasn't obvious to Violet already, it's very clear now that everything about this evening has been carefully orchestrated by her tormentor. But right as they're about to be reseated, Let's Play threatens Violet and commands her to stay at that table with the skyline view. So they do. At this point, Violet demands to know who he is, and he toys with her a little bit, saying maybe he's their waiter, maybe he's the pianist, etc. It's at this point that he then gives Violet her first mission: get the SD card from Henry's camera. Violet feigns that she has lost her wristwatch and asks Henry to inquire after it with the hostess.
This was my next Chekhov's whatever.
Yes.
Chekhov's watch in the purse.
Nice.
And so, yeah, because, as you know, she feigns that she loses it, but she actually sticks it in her purse. My guess was that it would pay off by he would later see that it was in the purse and realize that she was lying about losing it.
Aha. So did you, forgive the pun, did you clock the wristwatch in the opening credits?
No. I mean, no. I was, the opening credits, obviously there were a lot of objects, as you noted. And
yes.
At that point, I was kind of like, well, since I know literally nothing about this movie, I have no context or anything. I'm not even going to bother trying. I'm like, could this be Chekhov's, chess piece? Because I'm like, it could be all these things. But I mean, since I didn't have anything yet to even go on to make any kind of guesses about how anything would pay off, I just sort of set that aside as an abstract thing. And then I figured I would wait till the actual movie started to start making my guesses.
When Henry leaves the table in search of the wristwatch, he shows a frankly superhuman level of patience, in my opinion.
Yes.
When Henry leaves, Violet nabs the camera from Henry's bag. As she's scrolling through photos on the camera, she sees pictures of government wire transfers and financial statements before she removes the SD card itself. I thought that this scene was pretty good tension-wise. Overall, I felt the movie was successful as a thriller in the sense that it was pretty well paced, pretty tightly paced. There were lots of moments like this where Violet is trying desperately to do something before someone sees her or before Henry gets back to the table, for example. This was the first moment in the movie where I really was aware and noted mentally that I was like, oh, that's a good little bit of tension right there.
Yeah, that's something that almost always works, I think, in film or television or whatever, when you have a character that is desperately having to complete a task before somebody returns or somebody walks in on them. Yes. Or, the camera's turned back on or whatever the thing is and stuff. And it's just impossible for that not to create tension if you do it at all competently. And I think, this was I agree with you that it was well done in this case.
And I do think that they deployed their sound design well. They give you tense music and hey, it works.
Mm-hmm.
Let's Play then instructs Violet to go to the restroom, smash the SD card, and flush it. She complies. This is another part I liked in the movie because when she's receiving the text messages, you can see the reflection of the text messages in the mirror as though they were really there in that physical space with her. So it's a little bit gimmicky, but I thought it was fun. Like it's this pop-up text for the audience, but then it's as though it's in that 3D space of the restroom with her. So I thought this was a fun little visual effect.
Yeah, I think, it's one of those things where this is a problem with, I think, modern technology in general, is that it's not cinematic, right? It's yes. So much more cinematic to like whatever, like a classic detective story or something, right? Like it's so much more cinematic to have doing the shoe leather, right? Having somebody walking, and knocking on doors and talking to people. But like, what would you do in 2025? You just Google something, right? It's like they're all these things, right. But it's boring. Like you don't want to someone doesn't want to just look at a screen. Like, and so the same thing with text. In text, of course, is ubiquitous. Like obviously in society, we all use it all the time. That's how people would communicate. But again, it's not very interesting just to look at a phone screen. So finding other ways to present that and create something a little more cinematic, I thought they did, a solid job with it. I mean, there's been a lot of different variations of that in different shows and movies over the years, but I think it is a continuing challenge just in general to how do you present modern technology in a way that is at all engaging on film.
That's a very good point. I think that Sherlock is maybe a good example of making technology more cinematic. It could be a little cheesy sometimes, though, with him going to his mind palace or whatever, but they did do a good job of making texts and thoughts more interactive and more tangible.
You mentioned her smashing the SD card. And this is like not really necessarily nitpick, just like, but the way that the card really broke down into powder, like almost. I was like, is that what happens to SD cards? Like, and what was she crushing it with? Like, was like,
right.
what did she? Couldn't even tell what it felt. I don't know. Maybe I want to see like a MythBusters on that. Is that actually something you can do?
Maybe she has superhuman strength.
Yeah, maybe that's going to be one of the revelations later in the film, that she's actually a superhero. You can't get away from superhero movies, no matter where you look.
It's true.
Anyway, I just thought that was sort of odd, the way that it broke apart. I've never tried to smash an SD card, so maybe it's 100% factually accurate.
More cinematic.
Yeah, exactly.
So even though Violet smashes the SD card as demanded, Let's Play isn't done with her yet. He guides Violet to a vial of poison hidden in the paper towel dispenser. Her final task? Kill Henry. It should be easy for her to do, Let's Play says. She killed her husband, after all. Violet takes the vial of poison and tries to find an out. She notices that the hostess station has a computer and opens a chat window with a crisis helpline on the hostess's computer.
I feel like this is maybe around the time in the film, I don't know where, but where it became obvious to me that Reed Diamond, hadn't been on screen for quite some time. To your point, right, earlier, you're like, okay, like, could Henry be the bad guy? Could be different people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know Reed Diamond's going to play like some kind of a significant role, but I don't know what it's going to be exactly, right, at the time that he's introduced. I'm just based on me recognizing his name in the credits and then being billed so high.
Mm-hmm.
But by now it's like, okay, you kind of can see that, as you say, economy of characters and the fact that he has not really come back other than very brief mentions of his bad blind date, that you can start seeing where that's going. And again, I think if I didn't know Reed Diamond, right? If I imagine many audience goers didn't, right? Even that name, I don't think it would have clicked. Like, it's only because, again, I know him. Like, if I just saw a name, I'd be like, oh, that's just another name of somebody I don't know. Like, I wouldn't have known the difference between him and Brandon Sklenar if I just saw the names, right? So I think it would be less of a telegraph thing, but unfortunately that's one little bit of knowledge that at this point I feel like was foreseen. Again, so I'm not counting it as a Chekhov's thing, but it is something at this point where I basically was like, okay, I think that it has to be that, right?
I think that's something that's interesting about Chekhov's guns in a mystery story is, where do you draw the line between a clue versus a Chekhov's gun? Or do you draw the line? Like, how do you make the distinction between, like, this is foreshadowing, this is a clue, this is a Chekhov's gun, So yeah, I think that at the very least, you're, definitely picking up on the clues and the subtext here and trying to piece together the mystery. Yeah, speaking of the bad guy, Let's Play knows that Violet is up to something. He can see her on the security cameras, and he escalates his threats against Toby. So she aborts her plan to talk to the Crisis Help Center and makes her way back to the table. On the way to the table, she bumps into that guy once again, the one that she had bumped into previously, and he makes some pointed comments that could be interpreted as threatening. So Violet seems to highly suspect that he might be Let's Play. And it's at this point, speaking of mysteries, that I would say, of course he's not Let's Play, right. Because going back to Agatha Christie, just to use that as our model here, in the Agatha Christie format, it's never who you most suspect. So this guy who is being totally sus and being kind of surly, it's just too obvious. There's no way he's the bad guy.
Plus our aforementioned knowledge of the of the cast.
Our aforementioned Reed Diamond, yes. When Violet gets back to the table, Henry has already asked for the check. His inexhaustible patience has apparently finally reached its end. He can tell that her head is not currently in the dating game, but Violet can't let Henry leave if she wants to protect Toby. So to get Henry to stay, Violet kisses him. Surprising no one, this works. This is a kind of fun trope in movies too, the kiss distraction.
Do you think that would work though? I mean, like, again, I mean, maybe this is where the plunging neckline pays off. Maybe this is why she had to do it. But I feel like personally, if I'm in a situation where the girl is, or the woman that I'm with on a date is acting totally crazy as she is, or or
Yes.
completely off, right? And so I'm like, okay, I got to get out of here. And then she like just kisses me out of the blue. I don't feel like that makes me feel like she's less crazy. I mean, maybe you stay for the story. You're just like, all right, now I have to stay because this is like almost, it's gone like through the looking glass of crazy to like, this is just like going to be a great story. It's what, for good or ill. And so maybe that's the impetus, but it doesn't seem like that's the reaction. It seems like the reaction is like, oh, now I feel really connected to this person. And so I'm going to stay, which I'm not sure I would react that way, but I don't know what you feel about it.
I feel like this kiss is only believable if we have a very uncharitable reading of Henry, which is to say, if we think that his whole goal of this date is to get laid, then I do think that getting the kiss would convince him to stay, because he's like, oh man, I don't know where this lady is. She's all over the place. I don't think I'm gonna seal the deal. But oh wait, she's kissing me. I'm back in the game.
Yes.
So I think that's the only way it works, really.
Yes. Or if Henry's really hard up and he's just like, but that doesn't really feel believable based on what we've seen of Henry. It's like, yeah, it's like Henry can get it, right? I mean,
yeah,
I think, yeah, and again, he's fairly charming. I mean, he has a 9-to-5 job. This guy, I'm sure he's able to land other dates. So
I'm sure he can draw the ladies for sure.
I don't think he has to be so desperate as to go to crazy town. But anyway, we'll I guess we'll have to let it go for the sake of the movie.
Yes, we'll let it go. So Henry and Violet sit back down again, and Violet asks whether Henry likes working for the mayor. It seems like she's trying to feel out what was on the SD card, what exactly it was she saw, and trying to figure out why Let's Play wants Henry dead. Henry goes cold at mention of the mayor, and he has nothing nice to say about him.
So this was my next Chekhov's whatever, and called it Chekhov's mayoral relationship. So, I mean, it was just a very weird response, and it was very clear that he's hiding something. He's saying, "Oh yeah, sure, he's a good guy," or yeah, it's fine, but he's not saying it in a way that is even remotely convincing, right? So
No.
to me, I was like, okay, he's definitely hiding something. And then my guess was that the mayor would turn out to be corrupt, but it's like, I don't even know how much of a guess that is, because we've already seen on the camera like certain documents and things like that. And while I don't think we knew exactly what they were, it's like it's hard not to draw the conclusion given his role and the mayor's office stuff, and having these documents on his camera, that these are somehow tied to the mayor and some kind of corruption. So again, I don't know how much that's a guess ahead versus like just drawing on the information we've already been given, even though it hasn't been explicitly stated that that's the case. But anyway, that's my next Chekhov's whatever.
Yes, something nefarious is going on for sure. I was laughing just because I liked your naming convention for this particular Chekhov's. As they are sitting at their table, the pianist starts playing a classy rendition of Baby Shark for Violet. This is a callback to his attempted flirtation when they were speaking before. Violet surreptitiously uses her lipstick to write a message on a $20 bill, folds it up, and asks the waiter to deliver the tip to the pianist and tell him it's from her. He does so, but he puts the bill in the piano player's tip jar, so he doesn't immediately see the message. Henry then gets an important call and excuses himself, and Violet watches anxiously as the pianist goes on break, plucks her tip from the tip jar to buy himself a drink, and seems to read her note, maybe. He makes eye contact with her, but it's not clear whether he's read the note or what he thinks of it. He gets himself a drink and then goes back to playing the piano as if nothing has happened. This was another scene that I thought was very successful in ratcheting up the tension. Again, it was like, is he going to see the note? Isn't he? Is he going to help? What's going to happen?
I agree. I think it was interestingly played, the way that, again, it was ambiguous whether he whether he actually had seen it. He was getting on his phone, and so it was like, oh, is he calling 911 or is he doing something else with it, right? Like, is he somehow involved, right? It's like there was a lot of ambiguity at this point still, so that created some tension.
Yeah, and I think there is still the question for people who don't know who Reed Diamond is at this point, like, is the pianist the bad guy? So there is that ambiguity as well. Henry returns to the table as their dinner arrives, and under Violet's salad is her dollar bill with the lipstick note. To which I say, gross. Like, she probably doesn't have much of an appetite anyway, but let's just say I ain't eaten anything that a dollar bill covered in lipstick has touched.
Yeah, dollar bills are famously dirty objects. Usually, when they put them in labs and examine them, there's like always bits of fecal matter and things like that. So so probably not what you want in your food necessarily.
No,
ideally. But I will say, how did that bill get into that salad?
Also a very good question. How indeed.
Yeah. I mean, again, at this point, we don't. I don't. We'll come back to it at the end.
Yes. So it's clear at this point that Violet's plan did not work, and Let's Play is on to her. He yells at her for her disobedience and warns that others will be punished because of her foolishness. The pianist stumbles away from the piano, seemingly poisoned, and on the nanny cam, Violet watches in horror as the masked man attacks her sister and locks Toby away in his room. Let's Play is losing his patience, and he commands her to finish the job. Violet convinces Henry to do shots with her. She says, "A shot never killed anybody." Wink, wink. And then she goes to the bartender for some tequila. The bartender, ever friendly and supportive, asks Violet if everything's okay because she can tell that something's off with her. But Violet deflects and also turns down the limes that the bartender offers her to go with the tequila. Another cheeky line in this scene is when the bartender asks Violet, "What's your poison?" Get it, audience? I don't know. Again, Agatha Christie rules. I, at this point, was not 100% sure it was Reed Diamond. I was like, it's either Reed Diamond or it's this bartender. Working strictly from the context of the movie, they are both very friendly, nice, affable characters. And per Agatha Christie rules, it's always the person you least suspect. So it's the affable, nice, friendly seeming person usually. So I was like, maybe it's the bartender, maybe
Would
not.
have made more sense how the dollar bill got in the salad.
It sure would. Yes.
Now they could be working in cahoots as well. That's the other possibility.
Cahoots. Always a possibility.
You don't want to overlook cahoots.
Never overlook cahoots. As Violet is away, Henry sees the wristwatch in her open purse. And when she returns to the table, he says, "You lied to me."
I thought she missed a pretty obvious opportunity just to say, like, oh, like, well, I must have accidentally put it in my purse and didn't remember that,
Yes.
right? Like, it's plausible that she wasn't hiding it in there, that that's like she thought she lost her watch. And, like, I'm sure we've all misplaced things. And then it turns out, oh, I put it in my drawer, whatever, the obvious place that I didn't look.
I do feel like this was not the gotcha or the revelation that the movie wants us to believe. Because like you said, it would be totally plausible and believable to be like, oh, oops, I forgot my wristwatch in my purse. Like, my bad. It's not like she's really cornered into revealing anything at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I get that maybe her mental state at this point is not the sharpest, and she's not able to, come up with a lie on her feet, given all the other pressures of the night that she's under. So, I can buy that. But there was a fairly easy way to play it off that she missed.
Absolutely. But before we find out what Violet does, it's time to take a quick commercial break and hear a few words from our sponsors. And we're back with a flashback. We return once again to that night with the fight between Violet and Blake, her husband. But before Violet can shoot her husband, he wrests the gun back from her and threatens to shoot himself and Toby. And then we flash forward once again to the scene in the restaurant.
So is this the first time that we return to that scene?
I believe it is. And I believe it is the only time, unless I missed a flashback later, but I believe this is our final flashback to that fateful night.
I think this is maybe the first time I realized that it was indeed a flashback and not a flash forward. I don't remember if I thought about it in between, but I remember feeling relieved at the point I realized, oh, good, this is something that happened in the past. So it's not giving away something future.
You're like, okay, I forgive you, movie, for starting with a flashback instead of a flash forward. So Violet makes some excuse about how she's just not feeling herself. And it's at this point where Violet and Henry move past simple chit-chat and really have a true heart-to-heart. She opens up about that awful night with her husband, how she feels she's failed as a mother, and how she did nothing when her son was being threatened by her husband. This line where she said she did nothing, I feel like this is really signposting the end of the movie. She'll have a chance later in the movie to redeem herself in her own eyes. There is this traumatic past event where she felt she did nothing to save Toby, but fortunately, this movie will give her the opportunity to do what she wished she had done initially, which is to step in and save her son. Henry opens up too. He's also been vaguely hurt before. He doesn't really go into details, but he gets a little misty-eyed, so we are to believe that they are on the same wavelength. But he still holds on to the hope of being happy. Violet apparently decides that it's now or never and asks Henry to get the limes she forgot for the shots. When he leaves the table, Violet seems to pour the vial of poison into his shot glass, though we don't get a shot of this directly. Her hands are just out of frame. So I did notice at this point that we don't entirely see her poisoning the shot glass. Did you notice this as well?
I did not pick up on that at the time. The sleight of hand of the film worked.
Yes,
worked
it
on me.
was just barely out of frame. So I feel like it was pretty successful misdirection, sleight of hand, like you said. She looks around the restaurant once more, still trying to piece together who Let's Play may be. Violet notices Richard, Reed Diamond, once again, the nice older guy who was there to meet a blind date who later stormed away from him dramatically, calling him an asshole. What could that have been about? Henry returns with the limes, and just as they're about to down the shots, Violet can't go through with it. At the very last second, she accidentally spills Henry's glass of red wine on him. Again, he is accommodating to a fault. He's like, it's cool. So he goes to clean up, and Violet makes her way to Richard's table with the shot glasses, which she offers to share with him. He declines, but he seems delighted to see her, calling her by name. Violet says she never told him her name before, and Richard's mask instantly slips. It's him. He's Let's Play. Dun, dun, dun. You did not see that coming, right?
Yes, as we've previously discussed, it was became fairly obvious once he sort of left the screen for an extended period of time. It became sort of obvious that he would have to be the bad guy, simply because you wouldn't place his name in the credits so high if he was truly only going to be this red herring character or this brief encounter at the bar. So it was the only really major role left in the film was the bad guy. So yeah, so that's it. Like I said, which I wish I hadn't known the actor, because then I think I would have been a little more on my toes, whatever, when it came to that reveal. But nevertheless, it is indeed Reed Diamond who does a good job, I think, of switching very quickly from a friendly to slimy persona.
He's a good actor. Yes, it's the big reveal. Richard explains everything. Henry has been working to expose the mayor's embezzlement scheme and was just about to hand over photographic evidence on the SD card to the FBI. The mayor and Richard couldn't let that happen, so they hatched a plot to murder Henry before he could testify. And who better to frame than a known Black Widow, Violet? Richard elaborates, the threatening messages and meme drops can't be traced back to him. Also, the cameras saw her spike the shot with the poisonous cocktail of drugs that she has a history of prescribing, no less. Richard is clearly very pleased with himself. He is relishing his evil plot, and the delicious panna cotta dessert he's just been served. So should we pick some nits?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do it. This is certainly you want to pick nits with the general elaborateness of this plot.
Yes, this is my very first note. Surely there are far less conspicuous, less convoluted ways to murder someone. Just for example, just spitballing here, let's hire a hitman to shoot Henry and steal his camera, make it look like a mugging gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Also, as you were saying, how did they clone her phone? How did they even know that Henry and Violet were chatting over a dating app?
Mm-hmm.
How did they even know about this first date? And okay, let's entertain the idea that they knew all about this because they had somehow hacked Henry's phone, let's say. But if they're all powerful enough to hack Henry's phone or hack Bumble's private messages or what have you, surely they'd be better at putting out a hit on someone in a more subtle way, I would think. A more foolproof way.
Yes, all of that. And I would say, so they try to give you like sort of a fig leaf of an explanation that, well, if the star witness just got murdered by like a hitman or something, for example, then like that would be obvious that something was amiss. It lead people back to being suspicious that, oh, there really is a lot of smoke, or with regards to the mayor or the mayor's office. So, I mean, sure, like I don't know that they would really care. I mean, in this scenario,
right?
But okay, like let's say they do. Like that's important to them that this be truly not seen as a killing because they don't want to draw that suspicion to the mayor's office. Like that was their attempt to be like why you would do this in the first place. But to your point, like there's still no way that this is the actual like best way to go about this.
It's like, this is the solution you came up with.
Yeah, this is very convoluted for that plan. And many of the things you already mentioned, like a couple things that I noted as well. One is like they were pretty lucky that like the person that he matched with on Bumble happened to be like a Black Widow or have that reputation. Like
Right.
What were the odds of that? Like what was their backup plan? Because that can't be the thing. They're like, well, let's just monitor his phone. We'll see who he matches with. Like, certainly, I mean, the odds are good he's going to match with the Black Widow, right? So we'll just wait till that happens, and then we'll spring into action, like on this presumably compressed timeline before he testifies or whatever. So, I mean, again, I assume they had to have a backup plan. Maybe, again, okay, so they were just monitoring in general, spying on him, and then this golden opportunity of this Black Widow, like, jumped up, and they said, okay, well, we got to do it now.
They're like, that was a freebie.
I mean, unless, or perhaps we're meant to believe that they actually set it up. They somehow, match these people. Since they seem to be omnipotent in many other ways, maybe they hacked the algorithm and connected these two people on whatever dating app. But anyway, the other thing is like, okay, let's let all that slide. Let's say that, they were watching it, they were spying, they saw it, they're like, okay, cool, we got a Black Widow. Now this is our opportunity. And they go in. Even so, is it really believable that she would poison a first date? Like, because the whole thing, right, is the established thing is that she killed her husband, but her husband was abusive, and they had been together for some number of years, in this abusive relationship before she's pushed to the edge and kills him. So it's like, oh, but I mean, if you kill any man, I guess you would kill like you're gonna then like kill a guy literally on the first date with poison,
right.
Like because you shot your abusive like husband. That does not seem like necessarily a jump that the police would automatically make, and they'd be like, yeah,
No.
I mean, she absolutely. I mean, she's got a history of killing guys, so she probably did this too.
Yeah, the MO does not line up, and also we never really get a clear picture of what did actually happen that night. But okay, let's say she killed him. Let's say she's the one who pulled the trigger. We have to assume that she was found not guilty, right? Otherwise, she would probably be in jail, correct? So we also have to assume that it was considered self-defense, or she was found not guilty. So even in that sense, it's like, well, is she even a Black Widow? So
Yes.
Why would the bad guys choose her to frame? The mind boggles.
Yes, that was my very next note, which is like, what did the police not believe her? Like, did she get tried and get acquitted? Like, what was the story? Like, I mean, maybe if like the police didn't believe her and then she actually got tried, but somehow she got off on a technicality or something, then you could be like, okay, she was a Black Widow. But like, if they truly did believe her, and or if she got tried and she proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt that she was indeed being abused and it was self-defense, then yeah, again, it doesn't match up as an MO of like, oh, now she's going to kill every single person that she goes on a date with.
Right.
So that was a bit tough to swallow. But the other thing is like, I think they even mention, I think Reed Diamond mentions in this scene, he says like, oh, because your fingerprints were on the gun, and I'm like, isn't it like a family gun? Like, would it be weird?
It's in their household.
Like, yeah, it's not like this was like a just a random gun that like appeared from nowhere stuff. And it was like, oh, your fingerprints were on it. It was in an alley, So again, it doesn't seem like that. Like, is that really oh, how damning, that she would have her fingerprints? Because his fingerprints were also on it. And indeed, at this point, I can't remember, have we seen at this point how that scene finishes playing out, the scene with her husband?
I will be the first to admit that maybe I missed another flashback in my, attempts to write notes in a dark theater, but I don't think we ever flash back to the opening scene again. I don't think that's ever fully illuminated what did in fact happen on that night.
So they definitely showed him at some point. They show him, like point the gun at the kid, right? And then he puts it under his own chin. And I swear that they don't show him like, graphically blow his head off, but they at least you hear the sound. Like, I think it's strongly implied that he killed himself.
I think it is implied that he shot himself. Yes, I think that is the implication.
So again, like, to me, it's like, did the police not believe that he shot himself because her fingerprints?
Like, did they not find the gunpowder burns contact on his skin since he shot himself point blank? I mean, surely there would be forensic evidence that he did indeed shoot himself in the head.
This is very sloppy police work is what I'm I'm the conclusion I'm drawing. I mean, if she really did get hung on her neck.
Yeah, that's the real story here, the miscarriage of justice in this in the death of her husband and her being blamed for it.
Maybe this is a commentary on the misogyny in our society, that this poor abused woman is accused of being a Black Widow when she didn't even, not only did she not kill in self-defense, she literally didn't kill at all.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So let's take at face value the bad guys' plan to, like you said, draw heat away from the mayor's office. Like, we want to have a death that diverts attention from the mayor's doings. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if you orchestrate a murder where the murderess is a sensationalized Black Widow, surely that would draw more media attention to Henry's death than less attention. It's like, just imagine the headlines: Black Widow poisons first date at high-rise restaurant. Like, I've listened to enough true crime podcasts in the past to know that there would be at least 3 true crime podcasts about this. And I don't think the mayor's office would be very happy about that.
I think 3 is a very low estimate.
And a Netflix special and a Hulu special.
Yeah. They didn't think that one through. They didn't think through the podcastosphere, did they?
No one ever thinks about the podcast. And also, okay, so what is their plan for Violet and her family after? Let's say it all goes smoothly. Violet kills Henry just as they planned. And ... then what? Do they just hope that Violet and Jen and Toby will stay silent forever under threat of harm? So then their other option to keep them silent is to murder Violet's entire family. See, again, not drawing attention to the mayoral office. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that is very true. That is a good point. You had mentioned earlier, like, as far as other potential options, right? Like the mugging one seems like good. Like, I get, again, the thing, we don't want to draw heat, so just having him like be a straight up assassinator or something, right? But like I said, what a mugging would that be a weird thing to happen to a person in a major city and have their camera bag stolen?
He's carrying around an expensive looking camera bag. That seems very plausible.
That is clearly the most straightforward thing you could do. Or maybe you run him down with a car, like
Sure.
again, hey, it's a busy city. There's a lot of traffic. People get hit every
Mm-hmm.
day, right? So these are just a couple of options. We're just spitballing here. I mean, no bad ideas in a brainstorm, but I do think that we have come up with a couple of better ones here. So maybe next time they should hire us
Yeah.
before spending whatever enormous amount of money they spent. Like they got these little miniature cameras, these bugs.
Mm-hmm.
They somehow hack the feed of the whole restaurant. Like, do they own the restaurant? Like, do they is this
Right.
like a front for like the mob that like
Right.
that they somehow like have a connection to, like so they're able to run, they're running the feeds, they're cloning phones.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of technology that they're incorporating, and pretty elaborate setups of things that just again seems excessive when you consider the potential alternatives. But
Exactly. They should have kept it simple. And also, like you were saying before, like, how did the dollar bill get under her salad? There's a lot of moments in here where it's like, how did Ree Diamond's character pull that off? And the answer is shrug. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it too hard, audience. It's fine. But yeah, and also Richard explains this whole plot very quickly. And I think it's very intentional that this is all glossed over quite quickly, because it is more successful if you don't have time to marinate in the implications in the moment, and you can just sort of go along with the ride of the movie.
I will say that I agree with you on the moving through it speedily, because in the moment, like, I didn't necessarily think about all this stuff, right? This is the stuff that, once I left the theater and started running it back, I'm like, wait a minute, like,
Yes.
and it's like, but what about, so yeah. So in the moment,
Yes.
again, they rush through it quickly enough, and then they get on to the next action that again, if you're not, if you're thinking that hard about it in the movie is basically failed already, because you shouldn't
True.
be thinking that analytically, I think, if the movie has done its job. So yes, while a lot of it doesn't add up in the moment, it sort of works as much as it needs to.
I agree, for sure. It was successful in the moment. The movie did its job of entertaining me and also distracting me. So it glosses over the bad guy's plot. It explains just enough to be like, oh, this is the bad guy. This is their motivation. Okay, moving on. We still have to resolve the main tension of the movie. So it did do a good job of keeping the forward momentum, keeping me in the moment of the film. Like you said, it wasn't until I got home that I went full cinema sins on this
Right.
thing.
Before we move on, one more note on this particular scene, which is, there's also the revel. I believe it's in this scene, right? I believe it's as he's talking, they do some like cuts to other visuals of the piano players. They basically explain the piano player situation. I think the last thing we see of the piano player is he kind of rushes into the elevator, and then we see the doors closing, and then Let's Play messages her saying something like he won't make it to the lobby, and then we
yes.
later see like an ambulance coming on the street, and then Henry says something like, oh, do you think that's for the piano player? But I don't think we actually see the resolution of that. But then they cut to some like flashbacks effectively of what did happen with him at the bar and whatnot. So I'm not totally clear on everything that happened here, right? Again, they move through it very quickly, probably for the best. But is the idea that they said they were going to kill the piano player's son if he didn't, if he basically didn't hang up, and not, because he was calling 911 essentially, like the thing that they leave ambiguous in the moment, that whether he read her note and actually was calling 911. But then the way they show it is that he was calling it, and then Let's Play messages him and says, hey, if you don't hang up, we're going to kill your son. Am I correct on that?
They definitely threatened the piano player. I don't remember the exact nature of the threat, but yes, the piano player did receive the note. He did intend to act, but then Richard intercepted him at the bar. He received a threatening message of some kind. I don't remember the exact details of it. And then Richard took the note from him and poisoned his drink in that moment as well.
So again, not to pick too many nits, but that's what we're here for, I guess, right?
Yes.
So I swear he said something about his son. Maybe I'm wrong, but if it is, I'm like, okay, so like, was this just like a generalized threat? Like, we know you have a son. Like, did they somehow have like a guy stationed at the piano player's son's house too? Like what was like, and like, how did they even know he had his son? Do they have dossiers on everybody at the entire bar? Like
they had a huge contingency plan. They sent a thug to literally everyone's home on that night.
The bartender's
like
house,
the bartender's
the
home.
Like that's what I'm wondering. Like was everyone's house? Were they just sitting outside everyone's house ready to jump into action? But I mean, whatever. Let's just say we go, okay, like, so it's a vague threat, and then he doesn't actually have like the guy posted at the house to show the feed, but still, it's like, how do you know you have a son? The bartender said it was his first night. That was established earlier in the film. Like the bartender said that it was the piano player's first night. So it's like, how would they even know he had a son? Like, did he see him on the lock screen of his phone? Like, I can't remember. It was all so quick that I was like later thinking about it. I'm like, did they show us, like, did they give us enough information that this made some degree of sense, you know, that he would be like, oh, I see he has a kid on his lock screen. So I'm going to say like, hey, you know, your son's going to die if you don't do this. But it was all, again, another thing that didn't make a lot of sense. And then if he does kill the piano player, right, like, wouldn't that draw attention? And like, wouldn't the police have then come and investigated the bar? Like if this guy died and literally they're like, well, where did he, you know, he died, he was poisoned. And it's like, well, where did he come from? It's like, oh, well, he's a piano player in the bar upstairs. Don't you think the police would have come up and started asking some questions? Like, hey, like, how did this guy get poisoned? What was he drinking? You know, whatever. Like, seems like for someone who is not wanting to draw attention to themselves and not wanting to bring police presence, that felt like a strange move to go to.
Richard does a lot of things that you would not expect someone trying to lay low to do. and let's say that Violet did successfully poison Henry. Then of course they would be like, well, she must have poisoned this pianist too. But on the security cameras, there'd be no footage of her poisoning the pianist. So I feel like their little plot would maybe fall apart in that regard too. And there's a lot of holes. There's a lot of holes in this plot here. Do better, Reed Diamond.
Come on.
Do better. He was a homicide detective for like 7 years. You think he could be better at this?
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, he should have stepped up and like told the screenwriter, listen, I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but you know, I investigated a lot of murders in my time, and this is not going to hold water.
I may not be a homicide detective, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn. What are those commercials? Anyway, yeah.
Exactly.
So after Richard reveals his entire evil, nefarious scheme, Henry wanders over to Violet, probably thinking, what the fuck is it now? And is eventually pressured by Violet and Richard into taking the shot. He seems 1000% done with their shit and heads back to his own table.
At this point, did you think that he drank the poison?
Okay, so before this, Violet had taken her own shot. And I thought that perhaps she had intentionally drunk the poison shot herself.
I did too.
Because like you said, also somewhere around this scene, Violet becomes aware that the poison is fast acting, but not instant. You know, it's not like the pianist died immediately. He was able to make his way to the lobby. So I thought at this point she had intentionally ingested the poison herself with the belief that she would somehow be able to, I don't know, seek an antidote in time before she died. This is what I thought happened.
I'm 100%. I was on the exact same page as you. And I thought because they had established that these meds were something that she prescribed, that it might make sense that she would know the antidote to that and maybe even have some in her purse or something. Or
it's like the Princess Bride iocane powder.
Exactly.
She has been giving herself low doses of these drugs. Yeah. Just in case.
Or she's self-administering,
yes.
Physician heal thyself. And so she's like, oh, yeah, I'm actually immune to. So, yeah, that would have been an interesting way to go.
Yeah. It's at this point that Violet appeals to Richard. She's done what he asked of her. Henry drank the shot. Now it's time to call off the thug who is holding Toby and Jen hostage. Richard complies and calls him off. With Toby now safe, Violet reveals her clever plot. You see, she got him monologuing. Richard was too busy twirling his proverbial mustache to notice that Violet had poisoned his delicious panna cotta. She had only pretended to spike Henry's shot before. My, how the turns have tabled. Enraged, Richard pulls a gun and tries to shoot Violet, but Henry heroically pushes her out of the way, taking the bullet himself.
This guy's a real champ, you know? I mean, he's put up with a lot tonight. And even after all this craziness, he's willing to take a bullet. I mean, I don't know.
He's been on perhaps the worst first date ever, and he's like, you know what? I'm still going to fall on my sword for that lady.
Yeah, this guy's a keeper.
Do we have a male equivalent of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl? And if we don't, I would like to humbly submit Henry as the archetype for the male version of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. He's handsome. He has the patience of a saint. He loves kids. He's heroic. He is willing to stand up for what's morally right. He likes hamburgers. You know, he's just the Manic Pixie Dream guy.
And yet somehow he's single.
Yeah, don't know what's wrong with him. Chaos erupts. Violet tries to escape from Richard, and he shoots at her repeatedly, bullets flying everywhere, including through the huge floor-to-ceiling panoramic windows. Finally, Richard has Violet pinned down. The poison is beginning to take hold, and he quickly calls back the masked man and orders him to kill Toby and Jen. Right as Richard is about to deliver the coup de grace to Violet, Violet throws the hockey puck directly at the splintering bullet hole in the window behind Richard. The window explodes outward, toppling Richard to his death, and Violet dangles precariously out the broken window, hanging on by a tablecloth. Okay, question. Is this skyscraper pressurized? Like, is this a thing that happens?
Yeah, that is the question I had as well. And I actually looked it up.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yes.
So I did the research here because I was wondering that as well. I was like, is that how it actually works? And according to AI summary, yes, that is indeed something that can happen.
Okay. My bad movie. I'm sorry for second guessing you. You got this thing right.
It did seem rather dramatic.
It did. They get sucked right out that window.
I don't know if it's that powerful in real life. I haven't personally been in a lot of high rises where windows were shattered, but if I ever am, I'll be sure to pay close attention and report back.
Back. Yeah. Henry once again proving just how perfect he is. He comes once again to Violet's rescue and pulls her out from the window. He is bleeding from his bullet wound, but it seems like he'll probably make it, and he'll just have to wait because Violet needs to rescue her son and her sister.
Seriously, put a ring on it, Violet.
Seriously. Yeah, lock that guy down. She calls the cops and takes Henry's car, rushing back home. At home, Jen is making a valiant attempt at fighting off the masked man, but the thug overpowers Jen and shoots her, though not fatally, and then he goes after Toby. Violet arrives on the scene, and in the scuffle, she manages to disarm the thug and pull off his mask, revealing him as the meter reader. Mm-hmm. Also, I have to say, I assume this is the meter reader because if I were watching this movie at home, this would be the point where I would go back to the beginning of the movie and make sure it was the same guy. Because I have to say his face did not leave that much of an impression on me. But I was like, well, this has to be the meter reader guy because who else would it be?
Yeah.
And she does have a moment of recognition like, oh, it's him.
Yeah, he needed like a big scar or something, so you're like, oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, no, I assume also that it was just the same as you. I'm like, because that's the only thing that makes sense that it would have been. But I also did not, he didn't leave a big impression either. I mean, I think I did, sort of recognize a beard, and both characters were bearded. Probably the only, no one else in this world has a beard, so it must be the same guy.
It has to be. Economy of characters. So even though she manages to disarm him, it's still a losing fight, and this really parallels the opening scene with Violet struggling with her husband. And just when it seems like all hope is lost, Toby drives his toy Jeep over to Violet, the gun balanced on top, and Violet shoots the masked man dead. Jen hobbles downstairs, and the family is once again reunited, and Jen very, I would say, inappropriately says, "So how was your date?" Read the room, Jen. Come on.
Yeah, pretty clever under the circumstances of being, by the way, that she got shot and basically at point blank range. This is where I have to, again, jump into the nitpick mode, which to say that this henchman is terrible.
He's really bad.
I mean, really, don't quit your day job as a meter reader, man, because, I just have to assume he actually is a meter reader, and that wasn't a clever cover, because he's really bad as a henchman. And why can't Reed Diamond? They can do all this. They have all this money. Maybe they spent too much money on the cameras and cloning the phone and stuff. They didn't have anything left over for the henchman. They had to go bargain basement. But this guy, I mean, first off, like, he has a chance to kill the kid, right? Like, he totally freezes, gives like way too much time for the sister to hit him with the glass. So I'm not saying like I would just be ready to blow away a kid at the drop of a hat, but also I'm not taking jobs as a henchman, and invading people's homes. I kind of feel like you got to know what you're there for, right? Like, maybe this is one of those things you're just hoping it wouldn't have to come to this. I don't know, but moment of conscience or something. I'm not sure, but that's, again, you just can't have that if you're going to be a good henchman. You got to get rid of the conscience. Then at the other point, like he basically grabs the kid and he's carrying him. Like, what's the plan? Why are you carrying him? What are you taking him to another location? Like, did he not have his gun at this point, or is he? And even if he didn't, like, are you carrying him to the gun? Like, why not just break his neck or something? Like, what is the point of carrying this kid around? You're just wasting time. And then he shoots Violet, right? He shoots her basically at point blank range, and she survives. Like, what did he do? Did he just clip her in the shoulder or something? I mean, center body mass, my man. I mean, this is not that complicated, right? Like, it's just like, you should not be able to miss at that range a kill shot. I'm very disappointed with his performance.
I think we have to assume he lied on his resume.
No, this was an AI resume for sure. This was just, ChatGPT, write a resume for someone as an experienced hitman.
He was, like you said, he was truly, let's say, a water meter reader, if that's a thing. And he saw a job posting for wet work, and he was like, hey, that's me.
Yeah. I deal with water, wet. It's probably got to be close enough, right? Yeah, imagine if that was his first day, like,
It was the waiter's first day. It was his first day.
Maybe that's the thematic thread that connects this whole movie together. First date, first day, first time on a job. Yeah, that's probably what it was. I think that's what the filmmakers were ultimately going for. I think we deciphered it.
The only explanation.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess he doesn't have to worry about, jobs, day jobs, or any jobs at this point.
He's been fired.
There you go. Hey, you brought it home. We talked about this podcast being about bad puns, and
that's what I'm here for.
It's a beautiful callback.
Oh, thank you. In our final scene, Violet visits Henry in the hospital. The mayor's crimes have been exposed and all is well. Violet and Henry exchange some more playful banter and some heartfelt looks. And then Jen absolutely ruins the moment. She is also in the hospital. She sends a prank meme drop to Violet posing as Let's Play, to which she says, "Too soon? Fuck yes, too soon, Jen. What is your problem?" Violet and Henry agree to a second date, hopefully a more boring date. But in the meantime, they enjoy some hamburgers and milkshakes together. The end. So that was Drop. What did you think overall? What were your overall impressions of this movie?
So I would say I like this kind of movie, just as a general matter, right? Like, this reminded me of other movies where people, like regular people who aren't heroes, yes, right? Who aren't like trained, cops or spies or something, basically get caught in a situation, like a terrible situation, and they have to do what they're told and try to find their way out, like, in this cat and mouse game kind of thing. Other movies that came to mind for me were like Die Hard 3, where they have the Simon Says game. There was Nick of Time in the 90s with Johnny Depp and Christopher Walken.
Yeah, I totally forgotten about that movie. Thank you for reminding me of that movie. I really liked that movie.
Yeah, I feel like it's sort of a lost to time. It didn't necessarily leave a huge cultural footprint, but entertaining. And then there's a Black Mirror episode called Shut Up and Dance that involves, kind of a blackmail situation where a character is being forced to do all these tasks for the blackmailer. Very similar to this. I don't know if you've seen that.
I also had on my list Speed,
Yep.
Phone Booth, and also Carry On, which I
Yep.
did a previous episode on. Definitely a less successful version of this concept.
Yeah, I had all of those as well. So and the Carry On, our mutual friend told me that was one of her favorite episodes. So so I actually knew that was a previous Chekhov's whatever topic.
It sure was.
And for sure, that was probably the most recent version of this. So yeah. So anyway, bottom line is I do like those types of movies in general. I guess one more reference that I would say this is not, cat and mouse in the same way of those previous movies that we mentioned, but one that, to tie into the Hitchcockian thing, there are definitely some Rear Window-esque elements here in the sense that obviously being basically locked down to a single location for most of the film, obviously the fact that there are, watching things happen via, in this case, instead of, windows, rather just with cameras, both her watching what's happening in her own house with cameras and then also being watched by cameras in the place. So so there's some of those elements that were reminiscent to there. And of course, that is an all-time classic and a better movie than this. But nevertheless, I think that for me, I would say that because I like that, and I also like movies that have limited locations, right? Just I think that's always a fun constraint. In general, I think a lot of the most interesting filmmaking comes from constraints, right? Like when you have an unlimited budget and you can do whatever you want, it often is very tough to be as creative, right? When the creativity comes from being hemmed in by certain ways and having to figure out how do I do these things with all these guardrails and all these constraints. And so I do like that as well. I also just personally appreciate any movie that is very light on CGI, that is not just about regular people, but about like just normal situations that you can just encounter in the real world and shoot actual live things. I imagine there was some CGI with the hanging off the skyscraper scene, but other than that, I think probably again, there's always lots of little CGI in movies and stuff, but like maybe with probably some of the car chase stuff, whatever, but it's very unobtrusive, right? There's very little that it's obvious CGI, which I very much appreciate because it drives me crazy. I just prefer things to be practical, and obviously in a more grounded movie like this, it seems funny to call this grounded given some of the plotting elements, but nevertheless, like the actual situation itself is fairly grounded, and so you're able to do a lot more things like that. But anyway, so all that said, yeah, I think this was not a great version of that kind of film, but it was solid. Honestly, like I was entertained in the movie. I was entertained, for the duration, I would say. And so even though we have picked plenty of nits, and I think deservedly so, as we also have talked about, they don't really hang you up in the process of watching the film, which is important. It would be even better if then when you looked back, you didn't so readily find them,
Right.
But, third acts are hard. Most movies, that's where they struggle. They have good setup, they have good rising action. And then the third act is where things kind of fall apart and just landing the plane is hard. So this movie is not totally successful in that regard, but also not totally unsuccessful. So that's my general impressions.
Agreed. Plot holes, I feel like, are most problematic when in the middle of watching the movie, you're pulled out of the movie, where the spell breaks, you're no longer entertained or enthralled by the movie, and instead you're in your head critiquing it. And I do think the movie managed to avoid that. It kept you in the moment in the movie. So even though it was a bit silly conceptually, plot wise, it did not ruin my enjoyment of the film in the moment. Like you said, it was like, in hindsight, there's many moments where you're scratching your chin like, hey, wait a second. I do also really like this type of movie, Speed, all those other movies you've mentioned. I really enjoy this premise. I just think it's so ripe for tension, for a thriller. I like the whole format of there's an unseen tormentor and you have this everyday hero who is trying to outsmart them at every step of the game. Even though it seems like the bad guy is like 10 steps ahead, the good guy still finds a way to pull one over on this bad guy who thinks they have anticipated everything. But what they didn't anticipate was that the hero isn't easily bullied and in fact is tenacious and clever and brave. So I really like all of those aspects of movies like this. I feel like that Drop also successfully did that with their main characters. I enjoyed Megan Fahey's performance. I do feel like it was successful as a thriller. It was fun. It was a little bit chaotic, a little bit bumpy at times, but it was a thrill ride. Speaking of thrill rides, it's had its ups and downs, but overall I was just like, I was just plainly entertained. I think it delivered on its promise to the audience of having a fun, entertaining thriller. Although that being said, I was a little put off by the traumatic domestic abuse backstory. I just feel like it's such a heavy element to put in what is overall a rather goofy movie. Like there's a lot of goofy humor, goofy characters. It could be an entirely fun and silly movie, but because of this quite serious subject matter, it does suck a little bit of the fun out of the movie. And of course, definitely a subject that movies are obviously welcome to explore. I just don't know if this was the right venue for that subject matter necessarily.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I didn't even really think about that. I guess I feel like that plot line was so underexplored that it didn't even really occur to me that this is potentially an insensitive portrayal of something that is like obviously a quite serious situation for many people, and they didn't necessarily earn that, right? Like, which is to your point, like, right? Obviously, many movies can be made on the topic and can be powerful and good, but this was one that maybe didn't earn that degree. But because they just didn't spend that much time on it, it didn't occur to me, at least when watching it. But
it's like either explore it more or don't have it in there at all. And I feel like considering the context of the rest of the movie, it's like, well, maybe don't have it in there at all as far as this particular movie goes.
So I think there was also a missed opportunity for a Chekhov's whatever with regards to that plot. So when they show the scene, right, the flashback scene, she is struggling to pull the trigger, right? She puts pressure on it, but she ultimately can't bring herself to pull the trigger and effectively save herself, save her son, right? But at the end, when she gets the gun delivered on the truck, she does pull the trigger. So it's basically like Chekhov's trigger pull, which is really, really close to Chekhov's gun, right? So it's not the same
Chekhov's
gun.
literal gun, yeah.
So it's not quite Chekhov's gun because it's not introducing the gun, but it's basically Chekhov's trigger pull. But they don't have her struggle to pull the trigger. She just like immediately does
That's
it,
true.
Which of course is the right thing to do in the situation. Although the henchman would have probably tripped over himself anyway and not been able to take advantage if she hadn't.
Right.
But there could have been a moment, right, where he was frozen, like because she's got the gun on him, but she's actually struggling to pull the trigger again, and then that ties back into that initial scene. And it's like this time she struggles, but she actually goes through with it and is able to do it and able to protect herself and her son. So I feel like a little bit of missed opportunity there. I again, maybe for the best, because that just brings like even more attention to an element which perhaps did not work or wasn't earned. But it occurred to me that was something that they could have tied back in a little more tightly.
It could have been an opportunity for a more concrete callback for sure. You mentioned Black Mirror. I also like this movie just for playing with the concept of today's technology, like having today's technology be so central to the plot and then extrapolating from the idea of like what would happen if this technology were to be employed in this way. I don't think the movie, despite its name and despite that plot point, lives or dies by the airdrop conceit. Like I feel like they could have had essentially the same plot without airdrops. Like it could have just been like threatening text messages or something,
right.
But that being said, I do always appreciate when movies try to be topical or about technology or try to say something interesting about technology. I don't know if it did necessarily say something interesting, but I did like that gimmick. And I do think it was a gimmick overall, but it was a successful one for me. I thought it was fun. I found it an interesting concept for the movie.
Yeah, you could have imagined a different movie that was a little bit more of a social commentary on the way we use technology and the way we open ourselves up to being tracked or being assaulted digitally.
Yeah, having no privacy.
Right.
Mhm.
This movie did not seem to be interested in those ideas, but
No.
but I could imagine, right, this was definitely just a vessel to deliver the plot, I think, in this case. But you could imagine a movie that was more serious about exploring those things and might have been interesting. Obviously, would have been a different type of movie, but
Yeah.
speaking of the technology, I do want to come back to my earlier point about how it's difficult to make modern technology cinematic. And, we talked about their efforts to do that with sort of some of the stylistic flourishes with the text or the messages themselves. But I do think this is one place where, again, the movie suffered a little bit from the lack of being cinematic, because if you think of some of those other movies that we referenced, a lot of what makes them work is the charisma of the bad guy delivering the thing. Think of Dennis Hopper in Speed, right?
That's true.
Think of even while apparently you don't think it was that successful, the Carry On, right? Jason Bateman's character.
I love Jason Bateman. He was the best thing in that movie.
and like his charm, his menacing charm in that, right, is what made it work. And with this, like, you just don't have any of that if it's just words on a screen, right?
That's a really good point. Reed Diamond, he can have this very boyish attitude. So I think that would have been interesting if we could have seen him play with Violet a bit more in a more direct, more putting his face to the threats. I think probably would have been successful.
Yeah, or at least his voice, right?
Yeah.
Now, again, their whole reveal of this is who it was and he's been sitting, 3 tables away or whatever doesn't work if you, in that case, he's not like, whispering into his phone, the whole time.
Right.
Although I guess that was one of the things, maybe if you're talking about social commentary, that is reminding me, like, when she would look around the room to be like, oh, who could it be? It's like, okay, well, who's on their phone? Well, everybody,
Everybody. Yeah, that's a good point.
So maybe that was a little, that was probably a not unintentional bit. So maybe there was a little bit of commentary buried in there, but
true.
Again, I don't think it was too front and center. So that's one thing that I think is just tough. And there's just the position you put yourself in if you don't have, if you're going to just doing it with words, with just text, it's hard to make that work in a way that's compelling. So I think it worked okay for what it was, but I think there was a little something that those other movies have, like an extra layer with having that character voice that is speaking to the person rather than just something they're reading.
That's a very good point. It's hard to make text threatening when it's a silly meme.
Right.
We talked a lot about what this movie could have been and how certain improvements could be made. But that being said, what was presented, I quite enjoyed. I felt like it was fun. It was thrilling. It wasn't a perfect movie, maybe not even a good movie, but I enjoyed it. I went along for the ride and I had a good time.
I concur.
All right, so that's going to do it for Drop. It is now time to move on to the game and tally the points. First, we had Chekhov's meter reader. This was something we both guessed. The meter reader definitely had a setup and a payoff. I don't think that either of us quite pinpointed the payoff precisely, so I would award us partial points in this case. Next up was Chekhov's toy Jeep, which did have a setup and a payoff. My guess was that the son was going to use the toy as a distraction. That's not exactly what happened, so I'm going to give myself partial points for that one as well.
Yeah, as I said, I missed this. I just didn't even notice the Jeep at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to the point that when at the end, when the Jeep pulls up with the gun, I was like, oh, they must have shown this earlier, because this is like, I recognize that this clearly must be the payoff for a Chekhov's whatever. Yes. But since I did not, clock it initially, I was like, I guess they showed it earlier, but I don't remember it. So
we'll blame it on the, once again, taking notes furiously in a dark movie theater.
Yeah, I appreciate your charitableness in that regard.
Next up was your guest Chekhov's nanny cam. I would say that this did have the payoff in the way that you predicted.
Yes.
So we're going to do full points for that one. So do you want to make this an official guess, Chekhov's Reed Diamond?
I don't know. Like I said, I don't really think, unless, I don't, depends how meta that we can get with this game, right? Because it was, I would say it's more of an economy of characters thing. And also it was like, I knew at this point that he was going to be like somewhat significant because of his placement in the credits, yes. But I didn't know that he would be like the bad guy per se, right? It was only later when he had been gone for quite a while, right? He had been off screen for quite a while that I was like, okay, now he must be the bad guy because, again, they're not putting him third in their credits and showing him once and then never coming back to him. And it had been long enough that it's like there's no other obvious role for him to play. So I wouldn't call that a Chekhov's whatever personally.
This is hard for me where I feel like the line gets a little squishy between Chekhov's gun and a clue. Just vibes wise, I feel like this is a clue and not a Chekhov's gun. But I'm afraid I can't quite articulate it any better than that at this moment.
To me, it's the meta layer, right? Like if I did not know who Reed Diamond was, I mean, I might have said like, oh, this person is going to have some other role, but I felt like that about a lot of people, right? Like, and I didn't write down like the hostess or the bartender or anything because it's like, yeah, they're going to play a role in the film, but like I could guess they're going to do other things, a piano player or whatever. But I didn't. That didn't make me go like, oh, they must be a Chekhov's, whatever, you know. So yeah, I would say since I wouldn't have done it and I only did it because of my meta knowledge of Reed Diamond as an actor, I would definitely say it's disqualified.
We'll just say no points, but no penalties either. Because when you first brought it up, you said you weren't really classifying it as an official guess. So next we have Chekhov's reaction to heights. Once again, I think this is something kind of similar. It's like sort of foreshadowing, but also I don't feel like her fear of heights really played that much of a role in the movie. And in fact, she kind of even sort of plays up her fear of heights just to move tables. It's not even really that she is that afraid of heights. She just wants to move away from the bugged table lamp.
Yeah. And she, like, my guess again was that she would have to overcome it at a climactic moment. And while the heights does involve a climactic moment, because of course the climax of the film is basically her, dangling out a window. Like, it's not like she overcame her fear. Like, if she had to like go out the window to like do something, that would have been one thing, but it was more she just got sucked out and then, got saved and she was just hanging on for dear life. So there was no particular overcoming, at least in a psychological sense. But I guess you could argue that the reaction to heights, that it does come back, not to say her reaction to it, but the heights themselves like comes back at literally like the climax of the film.
This is one of these moments where it's impossible for me to unknow what I already knew, which is having watched the trailer that she was gonna be falling out that window or dropping out that window, let's say. So I wouldn't have guessed this as a Chekhov's gun just because with my context of the movie, it would be too obvious.
Right.
I do feel like a hallmark of a Chekhov's gun is that it's a little bit more subtle. It's a little bit more subtextual than overt. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to classify this one. I would say it's foreshadowing and not a Chekhov's gun.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, next we both guessed Chekhov's hockey puck. Was this a weapon? She certainly used it to defeat the bad guy. And if we want to define a weapon as defeating the bad guy, then full points, I suppose. But I don't know. I would say it could go either way.
Well, yeah, since we both stand to benefit from it, we might as well be generous.
Full points, you're right.
But I do feel like ultimately it was a weapon because, yes, not in a traditional way of like striking somebody directly, but she ultimately used it to create the weapon effectively of the suction, which kills him. So I would say yes.
That's definitely true. All right. Next, I had Chekhov's camera bag. I feel like this is a Chekhov's gun in the sense that it has a setup and a payoff, but I feel like where we could maybe split hairs is that the bag itself wasn't important. It was the camera within the bag.
Not even the camera, it was the SD card.
That's true. It wasn't even the camera, it was the SD card. Yes. So I do feel like I successfully clued in on the fact that the contents of the bag were important, but I didn't guess exactly what the contents of the bag was.
What did you just say, contents of the bag?
Specifically, I thought there was going to be a weapon in the bag.
Okay.
So I definitely didn't get that right, but I did think it was going to be something in the bag.
Yeah, I would say the 2 points, but not the full bonus.
I would agree with that. Next, we have Chekhov's wristwatch in the purse. There is a setup and a payoff here. Well, okay, is there a payoff? I feel like there was not much of a payoff. Yes, Henry does discover the wristwatch, but to what plot end?
Well, so that's what makes him leave, right? or I mean, try to leave. Isn't that the final straw? So,
Okay.
so I feel like it was significant. I mean, again, my prediction was that he would see it later and realize she was lying, which is exactly what happened. And then that's what causes him to try to leave, which pushes it forward in the sense that then she's being given that instruction that if he leaves, that
You're right.
your son dies. So
totally. All right, you've convinced me. And finally, we have Chekhov's mayoral relationship. I don't know why that tickles me, but it does. It makes me laugh. So I might just call this a clue. I don't know. This is the thing. When does a clue become a Chekhov's gun and vice versa? Because you're certainly right. Like, this is certainly a breadcrumb that was laid about the mayor not being a good guy.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, like, it does come back, obviously, in the climax, or near the climax, when Reed Diamond is unspooling his very svelte plot that is not adorned with any additional flourishes or anything that were unnecessary. So I think we can all agree that was definitely the most concise way to get this job done. But yeah, but to your point about it being a clue rather than like a gun or a Chekhov's whatever. I think that's probably fair. I mean, it was, I basically identified that he was hiding something, which he was, but I think we kind of already had other information along those lines with the documents we saw on the camera. So it was just sort of more information along those lines.
Yeah, I do feel like often a Chekhov's gun has to be something a little bit more concrete or tangible. Like, if we look at our other Chekhov's gun here, we have the hockey puck, we have the contents of a camera bag, we have the toy car, we have the nanny cam, we have the meter reader. Like, I feel like these are all rather concrete, whereas like the idea of like a mayoral relationship, I don't know if I'd classify that as a Chekhov's gun.
Well, at least we got to say Chekhov's mayoral relationship multiple times. So if nothing else,
it's true. It's true.
Worth it for that. But I would say that there were a couple of Chekhov's guns that I retroactively was like, oh, I should have gotten that.
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
We already talked about the truck, although while I recognized it must have been one, since I didn't actually notice it in the first place, I didn't feel like, oh, I should have gotten that, since I didn't have the recognition in the first place. But the two that I did, and again, maybe these can be litigated as to whether they are indeed Chekhov's whatevers, but there's Chekhov's Baby Shark, which is now maybe this is a callback.
I would call that a callback.
But the only reason I say otherwise, or at least one could argue otherwise, I'm not going to be too stringent about it. But the Baby Shark comes back and it's played, which is actually kind of a a beautiful melody when it's played on a piano like that.
It was nice.
That's a very annoying song, but it wasn't so bad on a nice piano. But was that was what allowed her to give him the tip. It was like because he played her song that gave her the opportunity to give the tip, which obviously did move the plot forward in that way. So the plot couldn't have moved forward in that exact way had that song not been played.
Very good point.
So that was my thought there. When it first happened, right? I think I did note it as like, oh, and I started to think about making a note, but then the bartender says, oh, how old is your kid? And she hadn't told her she had a kid yet, but then it's just like from the fact that she requested Baby Shark, it was like that was obvious that she had a kid, right? Who else would, unless you're a real psychopath, why would you request that?
Who just listens to Baby Shark for
exactly.
fun?
so I thought, okay, maybe that was just giving information to the bartender. That was just shorthand for the bartender knowing without her having to, more clever than someone saying, so yeah, my son is at home right now with my, and just giving that exposition dump, right? But in any case, that was why I didn't write it down. And then the other one that I as soon as it happened, I was like, oh yeah, I should have noted that is Chekhov's limes.
Yes,
because she goes like, oh, do you want the limes? And she's like, nah, I don't need them. And she walks away, and it's a very strange interaction again to have for no reason. Why did you show her turning down limes? There was no reason to show that if that's not
right.
going to have. And of course, later it is very important to moving the plot forward because she would not be able to spike the drink or fake spike the drink, as the case may be, had he not left to go get the limes. So
yeah, both very good points.
So I missed both of those, but when they happened, I recognized them. So
very good point. I hadn't considered that Baby Shark was the inflection point or the opportunity for Violet to get a note to the pianist. So yeah, that was actually more important to the plot than I had initially considered.
All right. I guess now we can have the dramatic reveal of the final scoring.
Now I can make my robot noises as I tabulate the points. Beep, boop, beep.
And they say that, that modern technology can't be cinematic.
All right. The points have been tallied. This is a close one. Lots of points. I had a total of 9 points, and Kyle, you are a winner with a total of 10 points.
Oh, wow.
Congratulations.
Eked it out.
Kyle, thank you so much for joining me. I had an excellent time, and I would love to have you on again sometime.
Well, yeah, I would love to be on again. This was really fun. Anytime you get a chance to talk about movies with a fellow movie fan and one who has a lot of interesting observations and again weaving the game into it, it's something that I would love to do. So yeah, happy to return whenever you would like to have me.
Awesome. And to plug your movie once again, 7 Hours in Heaven, would you say, without spoiling your own movie, would you say that there are any Chekhov's guns in your movie?
Yes, I would.
So listener, you should check it out and play along.
Yeah, I would say that there's at least a couple of potential things I could latch onto as Chekhov's whatevers. But yeah, that would be interesting to see what people identify.
Well, I think that's a good tease. So Kyle, where can people find your movie and where can they find you online?
So the film 7 Hours in Heaven is available on Amazon Prime. So you can, on the streaming platform there, you can rent it or buy it. It unfortunately is no longer streaming for free with a Prime Video membership. It was for many years, but Amazon just randomly took it off that and they give no explanation as to their decision making. So,
well, listeners, you should pony up to rent the movie.
Well, yeah, I appreciate it. It's certainly nice to see I think we get about 50% of the cut that goes to the filmmaker in the event that you buy it or rent it. And but mostly, yeah, just appreciate anybody spending 90 minutes of their time to watch something that I obviously put a lot of my heart and soul into, as did all the other cast and crew on the film. So yeah, and if money truly is a problem, you can contact me and I will be happy to get you a free copy if you really want to see it, because that's the most important thing to me.
That's very generous. And I do also encourage our listeners to support creators. You mentioned you also have a YouTube channel?
I don't really have a YouTube channel per se. I mean, I do. I have a couple things on it. So there's a couple of short films on there. But if you just Google my name, then you're going to find a bunch of movies or a bunch of short films that I've been involved with. Some as an actor, some as the writer director, and things that will be on YouTube. So if you do my name in YouTube, you'll get a bunch of hits of me, and then this country western singer from West Virginia were the two Kyle Gerkins that dominate the Google search results. So
awesome. And I will put a link in the show notes where you can easily find 7 Hours in Heaven to rent or buy. And I would also encourage you listeners to check me out on YouTube, Chekhov's Whatever Podcast. It's a great place to subscribe to the podcast. So if you're enjoying, please like and subscribe, and also leave a comment. I always want to hear what y'all have to say. So thank you so much for listening, and until next time, bye. Thanks for listening to Chekhov's Whatever. Go to chekhovswhatever.substack.com to follow along with the podcast. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a positive review. You can also find video clips and full audio episodes on YouTube, so be sure to like and subscribe at Chekhov's Whatever. And finally, you can send email to chekhovswhateverpodcast@gmail.com. All right, let's end this show with a bang.